She stood shivering on the wet pavement, clutching nothing but a garbage bag filled with her old clothes. Inside the mansion she had scrubbed, decorated, and turned into a home, her husband was laughing, toasting champagne with the woman he was replacing her with. Mark thought Lakota was trash. He thought she was a nobody from the countryside who should be grateful he ever looked her way. He threw her out like yesterday's news. But Mark made a fatal calculation. He didn't know who Lakota really was. He had no idea that the poor orphan he just evicted was actually the estranged sole heiress to the Vance global empire. And by the time the fleet of black Rolls-Royces pulled up to the curb, it was already too late for him to beg. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, echoing through the silence of the large modern kitchen. It was 8:00 p.m. The roast chicken, seasoned with rosemary just the way Mark liked it, had been sitting on the counter for an hour, slowly losing its heat. Lakota Sterling wiped her hands on her worn-out apron and checked her reflection in the darkened window. She looked tired. At 26, she felt 40. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and her simple gray dress, the one she had bought at a thrift store 3 years ago, hung loosely on her frame. Tonight was their 4th wedding anniversary. "He's just busy," she whispered to herself, a mantra she had been repeating for the last 6 months. "Mark is building the company. He's doing this for us." Mark Sterling was the CEO of Sterling Tech, a company that had started in a garage but was now one of the rising stars of the Seattle tech scene. When they met, he was broke, stressed, and on the verge of bankruptcy. Lakota had worked 3 jobs, waitressing, cleaning, and tutoring to pay their rent and fund his prototype. She had cooked his meals, ironed his shirts, and comforted him when investors slammed doors in his face. Now they lived in a $3 million estate in the suburbs. But Lakota felt more like a maid than the mistress of the house. The sound of a heavy car engine growling in the driveway made her heart jump. She quickly smoothed her dress, lit the candles on the dining table, and put a smile on her face. The front door opened, but Mark wasn't alone. "Just put the bags in the hall, Beatrice." Mark's voice carried into the kitchen. Lakota's stomach dropped. His mother. Beatrice Sterling was a woman who wore pearls like armor and viewed Lakota as a stain on her son's pristine reputation. Lakota walked out to the foyer. "Mark, I didn't know your mother was coming for dinner. Happy anniversary." Mark was standing there, shaking rain off his expensive Italian trench coat. He didn't look at her. He didn't smile. Beside him, Beatrice was inspecting the dust on the hallway table with a critical finger. "Dinner," Mark scoffed, finally looking at her. His eyes were cold, devoid of the warmth she used to see when they were struggling. "We aren't eating here, Lakota." "But I made the roast," Lakota said, her voice trembling slightly. "And the chocolate tart." "Oh, for heaven's sake," Beatrice snapped, turning around. She was holding a lit cigarette despite Lakota's rule about no smoking in the house. "Stop whining about food, girl. Mark has something important to tell you. We don't have all night." Lakota looked between them. A terrible dread, cold and heavy, settled in her chest. "Mark, what's going on?" Mark sighed, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. He walked past her into the living room and poured himself a scotch without offering her anything. "Lakota, sit down." She didn't sit. She stood by the velvet armchair, her hands gripping the fabric. "I've been thinking a lot lately." Mark began, taking a sip. "About the company, about my image, about where I'm going." "We're going places, Mark. You're doing so well," Lakota said softly. "I am doing well," he corrected her sharply. "I am. Sterling Tech is about to go public. I'm going to be on the cover of Forbes next month. I'll be dining with senators, investors, global leaders." He paused, looking her up and down with a look of undisguised distaste. "And then there's you." "Me?" "Look at you, Lakota," Beatrice interjected, stepping forward with a cruel smirk. "You look like a washerwoman. You have no class, no education, no pedigree. Do you really think you can stand beside my son at a devastatingly high-end gala? You're an embarrassment." I can learn, Lakota stammered, tears pricking her eyes. I supported you when you had nothing, Mark. Does that count for nothing? Mark set his glass down hard on the coaster. That was the past. This is business. I need a wife who matches my valuation. Someone who brings connections, not just casserole. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. He tossed it onto the coffee table. It landed with a heavy thud. What is that? Lakota whispered. Divorce papers, Mark said calmly, and an eviction notice. The room spun. Lakota felt the air leave her lungs. Divorce, Mark, we promised. For richer or poorer. Stop with the drama, Mark snapped. I've been seeing someone else, Sarah Jenkins. Her father owns the Jenkins Media Group. She can help my career. You're just dead weight, Lakota. Sarah Jenkins. Lakota knew her. She was a tall, stunning brunette who had been consulting for Mark's company for months. Lakota had suspected, but she had been too afraid to ask. You're kicking me out, Lakota asked, her voice barely audible. Tonight on our anniversary. It's as good a day as any. Beatrice laughed, creating a cloud of smoke. Start fresh, out with the old trash. But I have nowhere to go, Lakota said, the reality crashing down on her. My name isn't on the deed. I have no savings because I put everything into your company accounts. And you signed a prenup, Mark reminded her coldly. You get nothing, just what you came in with. I signed that because I trusted you. Lakota screamed, the pain finally turning into anger. I signed it because you said it was just to make the investors happy. Mark checked his Rolex. You have 30 minutes to pack your things. Sarah is coming over at 9 till no, I don't want her to see your clutter. 30 minutes, Lakota gasped. Mark, it's pouring rain outside. Not my problem, Mark said, turning his back to her to pour another drink. Beatrice makes sure she doesn't take any of the jewelry I bought her. That stays. Beatrice stepped forward, her eyes gleaming with malice. With pleasure. The next 20 minutes were a blur of humiliation. Lakota ran upstairs to the master bedroom, the room she had painted, the bed she had made that morning, and pulled out an old suitcase. No, Beatrice said from the doorway. She was leaning against the frame, watching Lakota like a hawk. That suitcase is Louis Vuitton. Mark bought that for the trip to Cabo. You didn't pay for it. I need something to put my clothes in, Lakota cried. Beatrice walked over, grabbed a black heavy-duty trash bag from the bathroom closet, and threw it at Lakota. Use this. It suits you. Lakota bit her lip until it bled to keep from screaming. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction. She moved to the closet, grabbing her jeans, her old sweaters, the comfortable sneakers she wore to do the grocery shopping. She reached for a diamond necklace on the dresser, a gift from their second anniversary. Beatrice's hand shot out and clamped around Lakota's wrist. Her grip was surprisingly strong. Thief, put it down. It was a gift, Lakota hissed. It was an investment on Mark's part, an investment that didn't pay off. Drop it. Lakota dropped the necklace. She shoved her meager belongings into the plastic bag. She grabbed her phone and her charger. She looked around the room one last time. There was a framed photo of them on the nightstand taken 4 years ago. They were eating pizza on the floor of their empty apartment, laughing. Mark looked at her with such love in that photo. She grabbed the photo frame and smashed it on the floor. Beatrice jumped back. You crazy? I'm leaving, Lakota said, her voice dead calm. She walked down the grand staircase, the black trash bag slung over her shoulder. Mark was in the hallway, texting on his phone. Probably Sarah. He looked up as she reached the bottom step. For a second, just a split second, a flicker of something passed through his eyes. Guilt. Pity. But then he looked at the trash bag and the sneer returned. Leave the house key on the table, he said. Lakota dug the key out of her pocket and slammed it onto the marble console table. You will regret this, Mark. Not because I'll get revenge, but because you just threw away the only person who actually loved you for you, not your money. Mark laughed. A dry, humorless sound. I think I'll survive, Lakota. Goodbye. Beatrice opened the heavy oak front door. The sound of the rain was deafening. A crack of thunder shook the house. Get out, Beatrice said, and she literally shoved Lakota. Lakota stumbled, catching herself on the wet concrete of the porch. The door slammed shut behind her. The lock clicked. She was alone. The rain was freezing. It soaked through her thin dress in seconds. She walked down the long driveway, the gravel crunching under her feet. The security lights of the neighbors' houses flickered on, sensing movement. She felt like a criminal. She reached the iron gates at the end of the driveway and stepped onto the public street. She had no car. Mark had leased her car in the company name, and she knew the keys would have been taken too. She had $40 in her wallet. She walked for a mile, the rain mixing with the hot tears streaming down her face. She found shelter under the awning of a closed bus stop. She sat on the metal bench, shivering uncontrollably. She took out her phone. 12% battery. She scrolled through her contacts. Who could she call? Her friends were all couple friends she shared with Mark. They would side with the money. They always did. She had no siblings. Her thumb hovered over a blocked number at the very bottom of her list. A number she hadn't dialed in 7 years. Mother. Lakota had run away from home at 19. She had hated the suffocating control of her mother, Margaret Vance. Margaret was a titan of industry, a woman who ate competitors for breakfast. She had wanted to plan every second of Lakota's life, who she married, what she studied, what she wore. Lakota wanted love and freedom. She had chosen Mark, a poor boy with a dream, and her mother had cut her off. If you walk out that door with him, Margaret had said 7 years ago, don't come back until you realize you were wrong. Lakota had been wrong. Her finger trembled over the unblock button. She dialed. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Hello? The voice was sharp, commanding, and instantly recognizable. It hadn't aged a day. Mom, Lakota whispered, her voice breaking. There was a silence on the other end. A long, heavy silence. Lakota? Margaret's voice softened, losing its corporate edge. Where are you? I'm at a bus stop on Highland Avenue. Lakota sobbed, her pride finally shattering completely. He threw me out, Mom. Mark threw me out. I have nothing. I'm cold. Did he hurt you? The voice was now ice cold but dangerous. He broke my heart. And he took everything. Stay exactly where you are, Margaret ordered. Do not move. I am in New York, but I have people in Seattle. They will be there in 10 minutes. Mom, I'm sorry, Lakota cried. You were right. We will discuss who was right later, Margaret said firmly. Right now, you are a Vance, and no one treats a Vance like garbage and gets away with it. Dry your tears, Lakota. The game just changed. The line went dead. Lakota lowered the phone. She hugged the wet trash bag to her chest. For the first time in hours, despite the freezing rain, she felt a tiny spark of heat in her chest. It wasn't love. It was anger. 5 minutes later, the darkness of the street was pierced by blindingly bright LED headlights. It wasn't a taxi. 2 black Cadillac Escalades screeched to a halt in front of the bus stop. 4 men in dark suits jumped out holding large umbrellas. They moved with military precision. One of them, a tall man with a scar on his cheek, opened the back door of the lead car. He bowed his head slightly. Ms. Vance, he said, ignoring her trash bag and soaked appearance. Your mother is on the private jet. She will meet you at the penthouse suite at the Four Seasons. Please come in out of the rain. Lakota stood up. She looked back in the direction of the house she had been kicked out of. Let's go, she said. The suite at the Four Seasons was larger than the entire ground floor of Mark's house. It smelled of fresh lilies and expensive leather. Lakota had showered, scrubbing the feeling of Mark's betrayal off her skin, and was now wrapped in a plush white robe. She sat on the edge of the king-sized bed, staring at the city skyline. The door opened and Margaret Vance walked in. She was 60 but looked 45. Wearing a tailored Chanel suit and heels that clicked sharply on the marble floor, she radiated power. She didn't run to hug Lakota. That wasn't her way. She walked over, sat in the armchair opposite the bed, and looked her daughter up and down. "You look thin," Margaret said. "And pale." "It's been a long night," Lakota said quietly. "I looked into Sterling Tech on the flight over," Margaret said, crossing her legs. "Mid-size hardware firm. Going public next week. Valuation projected at roughly $400 million. Your ex-husband thinks he is a king." "He is," Lakota said bitterly. "In his world he is." "His world is a sandbox," Margaret scoffed. "And I am about to kick over his castle." Margaret leaned forward. "Lakota, you left because you wanted a simple life. You wanted true love. You got a narcissist who used you as a stepping stone. Now you have a choice. You can cry, take a settlement check I will force out of him, and go live quietly somewhere." Margaret paused, her eyes locking onto Lakota's. "Or you can take your rightful place as my successor. You can come back to Vance Global. We own the bank that finances his loans. We own the media company his new girlfriend's father operates under. We own the land his factory is built on." Lakota looked up. She thought about Beatrice laughing at her clothes. She thought about Mark throwing the divorce papers on the table. She thought about the rain. "I don't want a settlement," Lakota said. Her voice was stronger now. "Good." Margaret smiled a shark-like grin. "What do you want?" "I want him to know," Lakota said. "I want him to know exactly what he threw away. I want to buy his company mom. I want to be the one standing there when he realizes he's lost everything." Margaret stood up and walked over to the bed. For the first time, she placed a hand on Lakota's shoulder. It was a rare gesture of affection. "Welcome back to the family, Lakota. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we go shopping. If you are going to destroy a man, you need to dress for the occasion." The makeover. The next 3 days were a whirlwind. Lakota wasn't just given new clothes, she was armored. The stylist cut her hair into a sharp, sophisticated bob. The thrift store dresses were replaced by Armani, Gucci, and custom-tailored blazers that screamed authority. A team of lawyers briefed her on the intricacies of Vance Global's holdings. Lakota was smart. She had always been smart. She had an MBA before she met Mark, a degree she had hidden away to play the role of the supportive housewife. Now that knowledge came flooding back. "Sterling Tech's IPO launch party is this Friday," Margaret told her over breakfast on the 4th day. "It's the event of the season. Everyone will be there. Mark, his mother, the mistress." "And us?" Lakota asked, sipping her espresso. "We have an invitation." Margaret slid a gold-embossed card across the table. "Though they think they are inviting the CEO of Vance Global, a mysterious investor, they are desperate to court. Mark doesn't know the CEO is his mother-in-law. He never asked about your family, did he?" "Never," Lakota said. "He told me my past didn't matter because I was nobody." "Perfect," Margaret said. "You will attend as my representative, the new director of acquisitions for Vance Global." "He'll recognize me," Lakota said. "Will he?" Margaret gestured to the mirror. Lakota looked. The woman in the reflection wasn't the tired housewife in the gray rag. She was stunning sharp and radiating a cold, dangerous beauty. She wore a backless emerald green gown that cost more than Mark's car, and diamonds dripped from her ears. "He might recognize the face," Margaret said, "but he won't recognize the power. And by the time he figures it out, you will already own the room." The grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton was a sea of black tuxedos and designer gowns. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the ceiling, casting a golden glow over Seattle's elite. Mark Sterling stood at the center of the room, a glass of vintage champagne in his hand. He looked impeccable in a midnight blue tuxedo. Beside him, Sarah Jenkins glittered in a red sequined dress that was cut low enough to be scandalous, but expensive enough to be considered fashion. "You've outdone yourself, darling," Sarah purred, tracing a finger down Mark's lapel. Everyone is looking at us. We are the power couple of the year. Mark smirked, scanning the room. They know Sterling Tech is the future, and with your father's media connections pushing the IPO, we're going to be billionaires by Monday. Beatrice Sterling approached them holding a plate of hors d'oeuvres. She looked triumphant. I just heard the senator asking about you, Mark, and to think 3 days ago you were worried about that little mouse making a scene. Lakota! Mark laughed, waving his hand dismissively. I've already forgotten her name. The lawyers sent the papers to her old email. She's probably crying in a motel somewhere. Good riddance, Beatrice sniffed. Now focus. The representative from Vance Global is supposed to be arriving any minute. If we secure their investment, the stock price will triple at the opening bell. I heard Vance Global is run by some iron lady, Sarah said, sipping her drink. Margaret Vance, but she sent a proxy. Probably some stiff accountant, Mark said confidently. I'll charm him, get the signature, and we'll celebrate. Suddenly, the hum of conversation in the ballroom died down. It started near the entrance, a ripple of silence that spread outward until the entire room was quiet. Heads turned. The double doors swung open. A woman stepped through. She was breathtaking. She wore a floor-length gown of deep emerald silk that clung to her curves like liquid. The back was entirely open, revealing flawless skin. Around her neck sat a diamond choker that caught the light with such brilliance it made the other jewelry in the room look like costume glass. Her blonde hair was cut in a sharp chic bob that framed a face of icy perfection. She didn't walk. She glided. 2 large bodyguards trailed her, but she commanded the space all on her own. Who is that? Sarah whispered, her jealousy flaring instantly. Mark's jaw tightened. He felt a strange tug in his chest, a sense of familiarity he couldn't place. I don't know, but look at the way the crowd parts for her. She's important. The woman walked straight toward the VIP circle where Mark, Sarah, and Beatrice stood. She didn't smile. Her eyes, cool and blue, locked onto Mark's face. Mark straightened his tie, putting on his best CEO smile. Good evening. I don't believe we've been introduced. I'm Mark Sterling. The woman stopped 3 feet away. The scent of her perfume hit him, a complex mix of jasmine and something darker like rain. It was intoxicating. I know who you are, Mr. Sterling, the woman said. Her voice was smooth, velvety, and utterly devoid of warmth. I've heard a lot about you. Mark's ego swelled. I'm flattered. And you are? I am the Director of Acquisitions for Vance Global, she said, extending a hand gloved in black silk. You can call me Ms. Vance. Beatrice gasped. Vance? You're Margaret Vance's daughter. I am, she replied, not looking at Beatrice. She kept her eyes on Mark. My mother sends her regrets. She entrusted me to handle the delicate matter of your company's future. Mark took her hand. It was cold. It is an honor, Ms. Vance, truly. Please let me get you a drink. We have so much to discuss. We certainly do, she said. Sarah stepped forward, staking her claim. She hooked her arm aggressively through Mark's. I'm Sarah Jenkins, Mark's partner. The woman turned her gaze to Sarah. It was a look of such withering condescension that Sarah actually took a half step back. Charmed, the woman said, dismissing her instantly. She turned back to Mark. Mr. Sterling, I prefer to talk business before pleasure. Shall we take a walk to the terrace, alone? Mark looked at Sarah, then at the billionaire heiress inviting him for a private chat. The choice took him less than a second. Of course, Mark said, untangling his arm from Sarah's grip. Sarah, stay with Mother. I'll be right back. As Mark led the mysterious Ms. Vance away, Beatrice leaned into Sarah. Don't worry, he's just closing the deal. But, doesn't she look familiar to you? Something about the eyes. She looks like trouble, Sarah snapped. The terrace was cool and quiet, overlooking the glittering city lights of Seattle. Mark leaned against the stone railing, trying to look casual, though his heart was pounding. This was it. The Vance investment would make him untouchable. "Your party is impressive," the woman said, standing in the shadows. "It's a reflection of our success." Mark beamed. "We value excellence, quality. We cut out the dead weight to ensure we soar." "Dead weight," she repeated slowly. "Is that how you describe loyalty?" Mark paused, confused. "In business, you have to be ruthless. Sometimes you have to let people go who don't fit the vision." "Like your wife." Mark froze. He set his champagne glass down. "Excuse me, who told you about that? I do my due diligence." "Mark." She stepped out of the shadows, the moonlight hitting her face. "I heard you evicted her 3 days ago, on your anniversary, in the rain." "That was a personal matter," Mark said defensively, his charm slipping. She was holding me back. She was a simple girl. She didn't understand this world. She belonged in a kitchen, not a boardroom." "Is that so?" The woman took a step closer. "And what if you were wrong? What if she was the only reason you had a boardroom to stand in?" "Look, Ms. Vance." Mark laughed nervously. "I don't know why you're interested in my ex-wife. She's nobody. She's probably scrubbing floors somewhere right now to pay for a hostel." "You really think that little of her?" "I think she was lucky to be with me as long as she was," Mark sneered. "I gave her a life she couldn't dream of. And she bored me." The woman nodded slowly. "You know, Mark, there's a funny thing about business. You have to know who your silent partners are." "I don't have silent partners." "Oh, but you do." She reached into her clutch and pulled out a folded document. "Do you recognize this?" Mark squinted in the dim light. That's my initial loan agreement. From 4 years ago. The angel investment that started Sterling Tech." "Correct. You signed this when you were desperate. When banks laughed at you, you took money from a shell company called Luna Holdings." "Yes, so what—" "Luna?" she whispered. "It means moon. Or Selene. Or Lakota." Mark felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. "What are you talking about?" "My mother. Margaret Vance set up Luna Holdings 7 years ago for me," she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous register, "to use when I wanted to help people anonymously. I used that fund to back your company, Mark. I was your first investor. I paid for the patent filings. I kept the lights on." Mark shook his head, stumbling back. No, that's impossible. Lakota was broke. She was a waitress." "Lakota was pretending to be broke because she wanted to be loved for herself, not her money." She shouted, the mask finally slipping to reveal the fury underneath. "I scrubbed your floors and cooked your meals and let you treat me like a servant because I thought you were a good man struggling to make it, but you weren't struggling, Mark. You were just using me." Mark stared at her. He looked at the emerald dress, the hair, and suddenly the pieces clicked. The eyes, the tilt of the chin. "Lakota," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Hello, husband," she said coldly. "No, you look expensive," she finished for him. "Amazing what happens when I stop spending my energy building you up and start spending my fortune on myself." Mark's mind was racing. He wasn't thinking about the apology. He was thinking about the math. If you own Luna Holdings," Mark stammered, "then I own 40% of Sterling Tech." Lakota smiled a cruel, beautiful smile. "And since you missed a payment clause in the fine print, a clause I triggered the moment you filed for divorce, I have the right to call in the full debt immediately." "I can't pay the full debt," Mark cried. "The cash is tied up in the IPO." "Exactly," Lakota said. "Which means as of 10 minutes ago, Vance Global has acquired your debt, and in exchange for forgiving it, we are taking controlling interest." She leaned in close, whispering in his ear, "I didn't just come to the party, Mark. I bought the party. I bought the company. I own you. Mark fell to his knees. It wasn't a figure of speech. His legs actually gave out. Mark, what are you doing down there? Sarah's voice cut through the tension. She had followed them out onto the terrace, Beatrice trailing behind her. They stopped staring at the scene. The powerful CEO, Mark Sterling, was on his knees before the Vance representative. Get up, Mark, Beatrice hissed. Have you lost your mind? People can see you through the glass. Mark looked up at his mother, his face pale as a sheet. Mom, it's her. Who? Beatrice demanded. It's Lakota. Beatrice froze. She squinted at the woman in the emerald dress. Don't be ridiculous. That fashion model is not your frumpy ex-wife. Oh, Beatrice, Lakota said, turning to face her mother-in-law. I always loved how you underestimated me. It made it so much easier to hide in plain sight. Beatrice dropped her plate. It shattered on the stone pavers. Lakota! You threw a trash bag at me, Lakota said, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. You told me to get out of your house. Well, I have news for you, Beatrice. The deed to that house was held as collateral by Luna Holdings, which means it's my house now. Again. Sarah Jenkins looked between them, her eyes wide. She was calculating fast. Mark, is this true? Does she own the company? Mark put his head in his hands. She owns the debt. She has controlling interest. I work for her now. Sarah let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. She looked at Mark with pure disgust. You idiot! You absolute incompetence! Sarah, please, Mark begged, reaching for her hand. We can fight this. Your father. My father doesn't do business with employees. Sarah spat, pulling her hand away. He does business with owners. You're nothing, Mark. You're just a fraud who got played by his own wife. Sarah turned to Lakota. Ms. Vance, or Mrs. Sterling, whatever you are, if I had known, I never would have associated with him. He told me you were a leech. He lies, Lakota said simply. Clearly, Sarah said. She took the massive diamond ring off her finger, the promise ring Mark had given her just hours ago, and threw it over the balcony railing. It vanished into the dark bushes below. I'm leaving. Don't call me Mark. Sarah stormed back into the ballroom. Sarah, wait! Mark tried to stand, but he stumbled. Beatrice was hyperventilating. This can't be happening. We are Sterlings. We are royalty. You are bankrupt, Lakota corrected her. Or you will be, unless you listen very carefully. Lakota walked over to the balcony door and signaled to her bodyguards. They stepped out, blocking the exit. Here is the deal, Lakota said, towering over Mark and Beatrice. I could destroy you. I could go into that ballroom, take the microphone, and tell everyone that Sterling Tech is insolvent. The stock would crash before it even launches. You would be destitute by morning. Mark looked up, tears streaming down his face. Please, Lakota, don't. I built this. It's my life. You built it on my back, Lakota screamed, the sound echoing off the glass. You built it with my money, my patience, and my love, and you repaid me with a trash bag. She took a deep breath, composing herself. The ice returned to her eyes. But I am not like you, Mark. I don't get off on cruelty. I am a businesswoman, and Sterling Tech has potential even if its CEO is a failure. What do you want? Mark asked. I'm keeping the company, Lakota said. It will be absorbed into the Vance Global portfolio. You will remain as CEO, in name only. Mark blinked. What? You will be a figurehead, Lakota explained. You will smile for the cameras. You will shake hands. But I will make every decision. I will control every dollar. And your salary, it will be reduced to minimum wage. Minimum wage? Beatrice shrieked. How will we live? You can live in the guest cottage, Lakota said to Beatrice. I'm taking the main house back, or you can leave, and take your trash bags with you. Lakota checked her diamond watch. Now fix your tie, Mark. Wipe your face. We have an announcement to make to the shareholders. You are going to introduce me as your new chairman of the board. I can't, Mark whispered. Everyone will know I lost. Yes. Lakota smiled, and it was the most terrifying thing he had ever seen. They will. Now get up. Mark stood up on shaking legs. He looked at the woman he had discarded, the woman who now held his entire life in her manicured hand. He realized with a sickening jolt that he had never really looked at her until this moment. And now he would never be able to look away. Lakota turned and walked back toward the ballroom, the lights framing her like a halo. "Coming, darling," she called back over her shoulder. Mark hung his head and followed her. The alarm clock on the bedside table buzzed with a grating mechanical sound that seemed to mock the headache pulsing behind Mark Sterling's eyes. He slapped it off, groaning as he sat up. The mattress beneath him was lumpy, a far cry from the hand-stitched imported Italian mattress he had slept on for the last 4 years. He looked around the room. The paint was peeling in the corner where the roof leaked. The air smelled of mildew and old dust. This wasn't the master suite of the Sterling estate. This was the guest cottage, a glorified shed at the bottom of the garden that had previously housed the groundskeeper. Now it housed the former king of Seattle Tech. "Mark," Beatrice's voice screeched from the kitchenette. "The water heater is dead again. I'm trying to wash my face with ice water." Mark rubbed his face, feeling the stubble. He couldn't afford the professional shaves he used to get daily. "I'll look at it later, Mother. I have to go to work." "Work?" Beatrice spat the word like a curse. "You mean servitude." Mark ignored her, pulled on his suit, the same charcoal one he had worn yesterday, because the dry cleaning bill was no longer covered by the company expense account, and stepped out into the drizzle. The walk up the winding driveway was the longest mile of his life. To his left, the main house rose majestically against the gray sky. He saw lights on in the master bedroom. He imagined Lakota in there, perhaps sipping the organic green tea she loved, looking out at the empire she had reclaimed. He had to scan his badge at the service entrance. The front door was restricted. The little red light on the reader blinked green, unlocking the door with a heavy clack that sounded like a prison cell closing, not opening. Inside the headquarters of Sterling Tech, now a subsidiary of Vance Global, the atmosphere was suffocating. The glass walls he had installed to symbolize transparency now served to put his humiliation on display for everyone to see. As he walked toward his office, conversations died instantly. Employees he had hired, people who used to scramble to open doors for him, now suddenly found their shoes incredibly interesting. He heard a stifled giggle from the marketing department. He reached his office. The plaque on the door still read, "Mark Sterling, CEO." But below it someone had taped a new laminated sign reporting to the office of the chairman. He sat down. His computer was locked out of the financial servers. He had access to email, the calendar, and the cafeteria menu. That was it. "Mr. Sterling." Mark jumped. Jessica, his former executive assistant, stood in the doorway. She didn't look terrified of him anymore. She looked exhausted. "What is it, Jessica?" Mark snapped, trying to summon a shred of his old authority. "The board meeting is starting in 10 minutes, she said, checking her tablet. "Ms. Vance sent a memo. She requested that you bring the revised Q3 physical prototypes to the conference room. Oh, and she mentioned the coffee machine on the executive floor is broken, so if you could stop by the break room on the 4th floor and bring a pot up, that would be helpful." Mark's blood ran cold. "She wants the CEO to fetch coffee." Jessica sighed. "She said that true leaders serve, Mr. Sterling. Don't shoot the messenger." Mark stood up, his fists clenching so hard his knuckles turned white. He wanted to flip the desk. He wanted to scream. But he knew the terms of the contract Lakota had forced him to sign. If he quit, he forfeited his salary in the cottage. He would be on the street with nothing but his debt. He was trapped in a golden cage of his own making. He walked to the elevator, rode it down to the 4th floor, brewed a pot of cheap office coffee and carried the tray back up. The shame burned his skin like fire. When he entered the boardroom, the air was crisp and smelled of expensive cologne. Lakota sat at the head of the long mahogany table. She looked radiant, wearing a cream-colored power suit that made her glow. She was typing on her laptop, not even looking up as he entered. To her right sat a man Mark had come to loathe with every fiber of his being, Julian Thorne. Julian was everything Mark had pretended to be. He was old money, effortlessly sophisticated, and possessing a razor-sharp intellect that made Mark feel like a child. Lakota had brought him in as the strategic consultant, but everyone knew he was the new power behind the throne. "Ah, Mark," Julian said, flashing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Right on time. Is that the dark roast? Lakota prefers a lighter blend in the morning, but we'll make do." "I am not a barista, Julian," Mark said through gritted teeth, slamming the tray down on the side table a little too hard. Coffee sloshed onto the saucer. "Careful," Lakota said, finally looking up. Her eyes were cool, detached. "That tray is silver-plated. We don't want to damage company assets, do we?" Mark took his seat at the far end of the table, the foot. "Let's just get this over with. I have ideas for the new interface update. If we pivot to a subscription model—" "We aren't doing the subscription model," Lakota cut him off. "Julian ran the numbers. It alienates 30% of our user base. We are scrapping the interface update entirely." "Scrapping it?" Mark stood up. "That was my baby. I spent 6 months developing that concept." "And it was a bad concept," Lakota said simply, as if discussing the weather. "It was flashy, expensive, and lacked substance. Much like your management style, Mark." A few board members coughed into their hands to hide their discomfort. "Sit down, Mark," Julian said softly. "We have more pressing matters. The sanitation audit." Mark froze. "The what?" "The basement archives," Julian explained, sliding a thick file down the long table. It stopped perfectly in front of Mark. "There's a mold issue. As CEO, you are responsible for the physical integrity of the building. We need you to supervise the cleanup crew today. Personally." "You want me to stand in a moldy basement with a bunch of cleaners?" Mark's voice rose to a shout. "I am the face of this company. The face of the company needs to ensure the foundation isn't rotting," Lakota said, locking eyes with him. "You built this house on shaky ground, Mark. Now you have to deal with the rot. Unless, of course, you'd prefer to resign." She let the question hang in the air. She knew he couldn't. She knew he was broke. Mark slowly sat back down. He felt small, microscopic. "I'll supervise the crew." "Excellent," Lakota smiled. It was the same smile she used to give him when he came home late, believing his lies about working late. Now he realized how much steel was hidden behind those lips. Meeting adjourned. The rest of the day was a blur of humiliation. Mark spent 4 hours in the damp basement watching men in hazmat suits scrub walls while he stood there in his Italian suit holding a clipboard. By the time he clocked out, yes, he had to clock out now, it was pouring rain. He drove the battered Toyota Corolla back to the cottage. The windshield wiper was broken, flapping uselessly against the glass. When he opened the door to the cottage, the smell of burnt toast greeted him. Beatrice was sitting at the tiny kitchen table surrounded by unpaid bills. She looked manic. Her hair was unkempt and she was wearing 3 sweaters to combat the chill. "They cut the cable," Beatrice said, not looking up. "I can't even watch the news. I am sitting here in silence like a prisoner." "We are prisoners, Mother," Mark said, throwing his keys into a bowl. He loosened his tie, feeling like he was choking. "She's enjoying this. She's playing with us like a cat plays with a dying mouse." "I saw them," Beatrice whispered. "Who?" "Lakota and that man. Julian." Beatrice looked up, her eyes wide and feverish. "I was watching from the window. They were walking in the rose garden. He put his coat around her shoulders. She laughed, Mark. She laughed like she used to laugh with you." Mark felt a jagged shard of jealousy pierce his chest. It wasn't that he loved Lakota. He realized now he was incapable of loving anyone but himself, but she was his. She was his possession, and seeing someone else enjoy what he had discarded made him sick. "She's winning," Mark muttered, sinking into a rickety chair. "She has the company. She has the money. She has the guy. And I have mold." "She only has the company because of the algorithm," Beatrice said sharply. The tone of her voice changed. It wasn't complaining anymore. It was conspiratorial. Mark looked at her. "What are you talking about?" Beatrice reached into her pocket and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. "I went to the library today, using the public computer. I sent an email." "To whom?" "To Arthur Jenkins, Sarah's father." Mark sat up straight. "Are you insane if Lakota finds out?" "Lakota thinks we are beaten dogs?" Beatrice hissed. "She isn't watching us." "Listen to me, Mark," Jenkins replied. "He is still furious that the IPO failed. He blames Lakota for embarrassing his daughter. He wants to destroy Vance Global just as much as we do." So he made an offer. Beatrice smoothed the paper out on the table. "He knows the core value of Sterling Tech isn't the hardware, it's the source code. The AI learning algorithm you wrote 5 years ago, the one that predicts market trends." "The Oracle code," Mark nodded. "It's the backbone of everything. Jenkins says if we bring him the source code, the raw data, not the encrypted version, he can build a clone platform in 3 months. He can undercut Lakota, steal her clients, and bankrupt Sterling Tech within a year." "That's corporate espionage," Mark whispered. "That's prison time, mother." "And this," Beatrice gestured around the squalid room, "is this not prison? Look at you, Mark. You are fetching coffee for the man sleeping with your wife. You are a joke." Mark flinched as if she had slapped him. "Jenkins is offering $10 million. Beatrice dropped the bomb. "Cash, deposited into an account in the Cayman Islands. A private jet waiting at the airstrip to take us there tonight." Mark stared at the water stain on the wall. $10 million. He could leave Seattle. He could leave the shame. He could buy a new suit, a new car, a new life. He could be Mark Sterling again. "But the code is air-gapped," Mark said, his voice trembling. "It's on the physical servers in the library vault. Only the CEO has access." "You are the CEO," Beatrice smiled, a cruel skeletal grin. "Lakota kept you as the figurehead, remember? She thinks she stripped you of power, but did she change the biometrics on the vault door?" Mark thought back. He hadn't tried to enter the vault since the takeover. But his fingerprints, his retinal scan, they were hard-coded into the building's architecture. Lakota was thorough, but was she that thorough? She was arrogant. She probably thought he was too broken to try. "Tonight," Beatrice whispered, leaning across the table. "Tonight, while she is sleeping in her silk sheets, dreaming of her perfect life, you go in, you take what is yours, and we burn her kingdom to the ground." Mark looked at his mother. He looked at the unpaid bills. He closed his eyes and saw Julian Thorne's smug smile in the boardroom. The fear in his gut was replaced by a cold, hard resolve. "Get your things packed," Mark said quietly. "We're leaving tonight." It was 2:00 a.m. The main house was dark. The estate was silent save for the rhythmic sweeping of the rain against the trees. Mark crept up the driveway dressed in black. He felt ridiculous, like a burglar in his own home, but the adrenaline was pumping through his veins. He still had his old key to the side entrance of the main house, the one the servants used. Lakota hadn't changed the locks on the exterior doors, only the internal command centers. He slipped inside. The house was warm, smelling of the expensive candles Lakota liked. He moved silently through the hallways he knew so well. He reached the library. Behind the false bookshelf was the entrance to the private server room where the physical backups of the prototype code were kept. It was an air-gapped system, meaning it couldn't be hacked remotely. You had to be in the room. Mark swiped his badge. The light blinked red. Access denied. "Damn it," he whispered. She had revoked his clearance. He tried a passcode Lakota's old birthday. Access denied. He tried the date of their wedding. Access denied. Sweat prickled on his forehead. He had one more guess before the silent alarm triggered. He thought about Lakota. What did she care about? What was the one thing she never forgot? He typed in the date her father died, the day she had told him about once in a moment of vulnerability years ago. He had pretended to listen then, but the number stuck. Access granted. The heavy steel door clicked open. Mark exhaled, slipping inside the cool humming room. He found the main terminal. He inserted a USB drive. Copying files, the screen read. Estimated time 4 minutes. Come on, Mark muttered, tapping his foot. 90%, 95%, 100%. Gotcha. Mark yanked the drive out. He turned to leave a grin spreading across his face. He had won. He would sell this to Jenkins, flee to the Cayman Islands, and leave Lakota with a hollow shell of a company. He opened the door to the library, and the lights blinded him. Going somewhere, Mark Tim? Lakota was sitting in the high-backed leather armchair facing the server room door. She was wearing a silk dressing gown, her legs crossed, a glass of red wine in her hand. But she wasn't alone. 2 police officers stood by the fireplace, and Julian was there leaning against the desk looking disappointed. Mark froze. Lakota, I was just checking the backups. The storm. Save it, Lakota said, her voice tired. You really are predictable, Mark. Beatrice calls Jenkins' office at 10:00 a.m. on an unencrypted line from the cottage. Did you think I wasn't monitoring the phone lines of the property I own? Mark's face went white. You knew. I knew before you even left the cottage tonight, Lakota said, standing up. I knew when you walked up the driveway. I let you in. I let you guess the password. I let you copy the file. Why? Mark croaked. Because... Julian stepped forward, holding up a warrant. Attempting to steal corporate trade secrets is a felony, but actually stealing them? Crossing the threshold with the drive in your pocket? That's 10 to 15 years in federal prison. Lakota walked over to Mark. She reached into his pocket and pulled out the USB drive. You see, Mark, she said softly, I didn't want you just fired. I wanted you gone. I needed you to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that you are exactly the snake I said you were. Lakota, please. Mark fell to his knees again. It was becoming a habit. My mother, she put me up to it. She's sick. We were desperate. You were greedy, Lakota corrected. You had a job. You had a home. It wasn't the palace you wanted, but it was more than you deserved. But you couldn't stand not being the king. She turned to the officers. Officers, he has the stolen property on his person. You have the security footage of the theft. Take him away. No! No! Mark screamed as the officers grabbed his arms. Lakota, we were married. Doesn't that mean anything? Lakota looked at him as they dragged him toward the door. It means I know exactly how to hurt you. As the flashing blue lights of the police cruiser illuminated the library, Beatrice ran into the room, hair wild, screaming. Mark. Grab her too, Lakota said to the remaining officer. Conspiracy to commit grand larceny. I have the recordings of her call to Jenkins. You witch, Beatrice shrieked as she was handcuffed. You ungrateful little gutter rat. That's Ms. Vance to you, Lakota said, taking a sip of her wine as her ex-husband and mother-in-law were hauled out into the rainy night. 6 months later, the morning sun hit the pavement of downtown Seattle. A man in a tattered coat sat on a crate outside a convenience store. His face was unshaven, his eyes hollow. It was Mark. He was out on bail awaiting trial, but his assets were frozen. His reputation was incinerated. No one in the city would hire him to sweep floors, let alone manage a team. Beatrice was in a state-run care facility, her mind finally snapping under the pressure of the legal battles. Mark looked up at the giant digital billboard across the street. It was a cover of Forbes magazine. The headline read, "The New Era of Tech Lakota. Vance leads Sterling Vance Global to record profits." There she was, Lakota. She looked magnificent in a white power suit, smiling a genuine, confident smile. Beside her on the cover in a smaller inset photo was Julian with the caption "New Fiancé and CFO announced." She had everything: the money, the respect, the love. And she had done it all while being kind, while being smart, and while refusing to be a victim. Mark looked down at his hands. He remembered the anniversary night. He remembered the trash bag. He realized now that the trash bag hadn't been for her clothes. It had been for him. He was the trash she had finally taken out. He pulled his collar up against the cold wind. The city moved on, leaving him behind in the dust of his own making. And that is how the arrogant Duke of the boardroom, Mark Sterling, lost his crown to the queen he tried to exile. Lakota didn't just survive. She conquered. She proved that true power isn't about how loud you shout or how much money you pretend to have. It's about resilience, intelligence, and knowing your own worth. Mark thought he could throw her away like garbage, but he forgot one simple rule of nature. What you bury doesn't always die. Sometimes it grows roots and comes back stronger than you ever imagined. If you enjoyed this story of karma, justice, and the ultimate comeback, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to share this video with a friend who needs a reminder that the best revenge is massive success. And if you haven't already, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss another dramatic story from us. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one. Or,